Buongiorno.
What up, dog? What up?
Buenos dias.
Um, I'm trying to think of oh, that's pretty bad. I can't think of a good morning in another language. Italian and
That's all I got.
Italian, Spanish, and English. It's I tapped it. That's
Yeah.
why are we speaking another language? Are we doing this
Yeah.
podcast and we
Nope.
do some Spanish? Maybe.
No, I would fail tremendously at that.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
I just wanted to sound
Dude,
smart
we
starting this podcast.
no, you do. You sound brilliant. You
Yeah,
sound
thanks.
brilliant. You sound like an international man, very classy, very sophisticated, sophisticant.
Huh?
So good job.
Thanks.
Good
Appreciate it.
job. One of our as we jump into this, one of our dudes, so we challenged the our kinetic men, I guess it was last month was the month of not June, but the month of was it last month was Friends Month?
It was May.
May
Yeah.
was Friends Month?
Yep.
Yeah, so it was Friends Month, and man, it's that month is always pretty incredible because a lot of guys they realize through that course of that month, and ourselves included, you realize a couple things. One, you realize potentially you don't have friends, so you don't have a lot of friends, or it's not a lot. A lot's that's not really important. You don't have quality friendship. Um, a lot of dudes realize that. A lot of dudes realize that they how little effort they put into friendship. That it's something that actually requires active engagement. And a lot of men, particularly at our age, realize, man, I have not prioritized this thing that is truly important. That's another thing that they realize is how important friendship truly is, or how important it should be in their lives.
And yeah,
And they just
how they haven't put it as important for quite a while.
right for years and years. And it's always a more powerful month than we anticipate, and there was no exception last month. But one of the guys took a unique twist on it, and I forgot what prompted it, but in one of our conversations,
I know.
one of us just threw out the idea of like, hey, like other people's perspectives might be
Yeah.
valuable to you, and maybe get the perspective of people as you're seeking friendships, maybe get outside of a circle of comfort and uh and see what that does, see what happens. And one of the guys was like, dude, I'm gonna go like make friends. He's like, I think I remember him saying, he's like, there's probably grandmas out there that have extremely unique perspectives from a number of different places that would benefit my life. And so he like committed to going out and making friends with like older dude, an older woman. And he said it was absolutely fascinating and so life-giving to sit down at coffee with somebody who I think he sent us a picture. He's a white dude, Navy white guy. And he sat down with an older black grandpa or something, right? And he's like, man, I just I just learned so much from this older gentleman. And also he didn't necessarily say it, but I imagine he learned things from a perspective that's vastly different than his. A man who has lived his entire life from a different culture, from a different background, and from a different time. And so it got me thinking, and we also had a conversation about this month is Pride Month, and there's so much there it's a very polarizing topic. And I don't necessarily think, and I'm not here to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't think, but I don't think I don't think these things have to be as polarizing as they are. And here's what I mean by that. Um if I think you should expend as much energy and passion and anger and all that kind of stuff. You should, if you feel all those things, I think it's a good indicator of potentially a place where you, if you truly desire to be, to expand your horizons, then it's probably a great indicator of a place that you have some work to do to maybe get to know something more about on a personal level, potentially somebody who does celebrate Pride Month, just as a just as something to enrich your human experience and maybe get broaden your perspective a little bit. And what I mean by that is, you and I were talking about it, and I was like, it'd be kind of an interesting challenge if just as an easy baseline, as an easy place to look, is each of the months that that we celebrate, all the months that we celebrate here. Why don't we just go use that as an opportunity, as a guideline, as guardrails? Just find somebody who fits that category and just have a conversation with them. Just meet them. So if it's Asian, Polynesian, Latino, Black History Month, whatever it is, like just use that as like an opportunity. Like the guy in the group, he picked old grandparents, like grandmas and grandpas. But use that as an opportunity to be like, huh, I just wonder, do I have any friends that fit that? And I don't want to, it doesn't have to be like a best friend or whatever, but do I know anybody? Do I even talk to anybody that fits that you know that fits that month? And if I don't, is that just a great opportunity to gain a perspective on something I just don't have? And is that important to me, right? Is it important to me, like as a Christian, if that's your background, is it important to me to truly love my neighbor? And who are my neighbors? And if my neighbors all look like me and talk like me and act like me, is that really like what Jesus intended? And if you don't know, look at his disciples. I mean, his disciples had everybody from a tax collector, which were hated by the Jewish community, hated, right? Matthew, all the way to like a Zionist, like a radical, like what we would probably call today, in all honesty, is a religious terrorist, right?
Yeah,
Like that
terrorist.
was his
Yeah.
group. Like that was his group. So if you're truly desirous to follow a great example, and if that example is Christ, then maybe it's time to like look in the mirror and be like, huh, maybe I should go meet somebody who celebrates Pride Month and gain a better appreciation and maybe some empathy. And maybe you don't, I mean, who knows what you gain from that? But I thought it was an interesting conversation you and I were having. And I was like, you know, I think when I looked at the months, there were a lot of gaps in my own life that I was like, I just don't know. Like, I don't truly know and have not necessarily cared to know somebody who fits in that. And Pride isn't one of those. We have a number of people in our, we both personally have people that we deeply care about. That Pride Month would be something that's important to them. But like the other ones, like do I really know the life experience, the lived experience of a whatever, take your pick. Um, like even, for me, what came to mind was as a Latino, like do I really know the lived experience of Mexican immigrants or Latin immigrants that come into this country and what they really truly go through and how, what their life is. And I'm like, no, I've not cared to take the time to broaden my horizons to that point. You know what I mean? I don't know
Yeah.
what your thoughts.
No, I think kind of back to the original discussion, um, that the question was, what would it look like if you pursued unlikely friendships, right? Like a friendship that just didn't make sense. Like to you know, the point of like, what if you had a friend who was like a grandpa that you like enjoyed hanging out with and had discussions with and met for coffee and not in the perspective of like a mentor and mentee, but just in the perspective of like just a friend, right? Like someone who just normally wouldn't be your friend. And like, what if you pursued something like that? What if you pursued, to your point, like someone who celebrated Pride Month of a different descent, of a different demographic, of a different cultural background. Like, what if that was your friend? And what if you pursued that? Would that give you more perspective? Would that give you more opportunity to understand and learn and be more empathetic, right? Be more understanding of the world, not from just this small myopic lens that you live in. And I think we have a really bad habit of just getting into community that that just is comfortable, that fits exactly in your little bubble, right? You know, the white Christian veteran man um, is who I hang out with, and that's for the most part who I hang out with, um, because that's me. That's comfortable. That's easy. And it's been eye-opening for me, just thought-provoking for me to do the same. And even maybe it's just maybe start with like picking some books or listening to some podcasts or watching some movies and videos. Like maybe just gain more knowledge on perspective of other people, right? I was listening to John Mark Comer and he was doing a sermon. I can't even remember what it was about, but he had mentioned a book that was written from um, a transgender female business entrepreneur, and like it was it was a pretty eye-opening title of a book, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but like he read it and it's 180 opposite of everything that he believes in, thinks about, but like it opened his eyes and perspective to have empathy towards that demographic and that culture. And so like, yeah, I mean, I think maybe we should do more of that. And maybe we should introduce our kids to that kind of stuff too, just to like let them have perspective and learn and see things differently from different lenses.
Yeah,
It's a
man.
good practice.
Yeah, and I think, again, I mean, you make a great point on who you hang out with, and I think it's worth analyzing and really putting scrutinizing why that is, right? Like, so a great example, like I've been challenged. There's family member and some close friends. This happened a couple times, and I mean, there's multiple family members actually, and multiple friends at this point. And it's interesting to me from a very, very young age, um, this idea, and this happened again, the last couple of weeks, but this idea of a child, uh, a young child being born, and it's very, very obvious that this child is just uncomfortable with in their own skin. But like, I'm not talking about like a teenager. I'm not talking about even like, I'm talking about a young child, right? Like babies that were not tiny babies, but kids that are like my son's age, for example, 7-year-old, my youngest son, who are too young. They're not influenced by all they're not in households of like that you would that they would be exposed necessarily to a lot of these conversations, right? Like transgender and gay. And even if they are, if there's conversations, it's not like they're not at an age where that stuff is like um necessarily being is a primary influence in their lives. But yet this child is completely uncomfortable in boys' clothes or girls' clothes, and is completely comfortable and goes the other way. And it forced me again, it reinforced in my mind. I'm like, man, the most important thing to me is that this is God's child and God's creation. Like that's the number one thing. Like God created this individual, and he created me and calls me to love this individual. And it's a lot easier when you're looking at kids, right? It's the conversation's very, very different every time I've had it. And it's but it forces me to be like, huh, it's just an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing to really um it's an interesting thing to assess from a perspective of like, what if? Like what does this mean? Not what if, it's just what does this mean? And if I believe in a God who's all knowing and omnipotent, omniscient, some it's a God that I worship, that I that I dedicate my life to, he's a lot more complicated than my little mind, right? And just what does that mean? And so it just forces, as you project that forward, these adults that we find so easy to hate and to make fun of and to have super strong opinions against, particularly this month for Pride Month. And the idea, the word pride and how much it just causes some of us to whatever it causes you, whatever emotions it causes you. I think that's worth looking at and realizing, especially from a Christian perspective, on what I do on a daily basis, how I treat people, and am I an example of Jesus or am I an example of not Jesus? Am I an example of myself? And even if you're not a Christian, is that example of myself, is that an ugly thing, right? Without the context of Jesus, if that's not part of your life, just is it something to aspire towards, or is it something to avoid, to be a closed-minded, hateful person? I don't know. It's up to you to decide. Frame that way is obviously kind of a, I mean, I'm showing my bias, but most important is how do you live? Like, how do you live that, right? And what is it in you that causes you to feel so much whatever anger, if it's anger towards these different groups that are not your, you know, white Christian veteran person? And do I care? Do I truly care about the lived experience? I love your idea with picking a book, dude. I read a book. I read it a while ago, but it opened my mind to a lot of different things. It's called "So You Want to Talk About Race." And it was a fascinating book, but that book would fall squarely. And I don't prescribe to this, so I'm probably going to mess this up for all the people who prescribe to the cancel culture type stuff. But it falls directly within like what somebody would characterize as woke and uh, alternative history, whatever the hateful words are that you choose. I'll tell you, I learned a lot from that book, bro. There's a lot of books on women that we've read, a lot of authors that we've talked to that are focused on women's issues, and they're fascinating. It's fascinating. It opens my perspective, right?
Yeah, didn't the you were the executive officer to the commanding officer of a female African American woman, and I know you had mentioned to
Yeah.
me multiple times that you had some really interesting conversations and changed your perspective on a lot of things.
I mean, huge, dude, huge. Because I highly respected her. I worked for her, and we became friends. And then she started confiding in things that she just lives with, and I'm like, wow. And I started noticing, right? Like, here's one small one, just, and people can chalk this up how they want, but, and it happened, it was funny because it happened to me shortly after I read that book. But, these microaggressions are real, right? Like, just think of how you'd say, there's a articulate black person that says something and whatever. And a lot of times, and I hear it now all the time, someone usually white, actually always white, will say, "Oh man, like he's really articulate. Like he speaks really well." Well, it's funny, and I never noticed that, but like you wouldn't say that to a white dude. It's just an expectation. But when a black person does it, you're like, "Oh my gosh, you're educated." Well, that is a great example of a microaggression, and it happened to me, and I laughed. I don't play the victim to it, but it happened. I was being interviewed by a CEO who I was coming in I was coming into a different role, and this individual was like, "Oh man, like you're really well spoken," and I was like, "Well, what would you expect? I'm
Yeah, what
a
would you expect?
educated naval officer, senior naval officer, have a master's degree, just like you, presumably." And I would
Yeah,
never think, and nobody would ever think to tell that person, um, "Oh, wow, white white person, you speak really good.
you're really smart.
You're really smart." And so but to continuously like, I just wasn't aware of that, right? And some people will be like, "Oh, that's hypersensitive," and you can chalk it up as you want, but that's somebody's lived experience. And if you think about and I assessed it from an honest perspective, and I was like, "Huh, I wouldn't say that to certain people, and I would to others. Why is that?"
Yeah.
And so it's just, it's just these little things looking at, and if truly, if you want to be a better person and you want to be somebody, most importantly, you want to be somebody who broadens your own horizons and is checking yourself, because this is a you issue. If you're racist, that's a you issue, right? Like you have something wrong with you. If you are bigoted or you're anti a certain group of people, you probably know nobody in that group of people. Like I know a lot of gay people. I have family that are gay.
Yeah.
I'm not anti those people. I don't hate those people. But if you find yourself saying I hate all these people, like that's something you should just explore. And I think these months of the year give us great opportunity to just look and be like, man, I literally know no black people or Latinos or Asian Pacific Islanders or whatever. And so you just don't know their experience. And it's a lot of times it's kind of fascinating, dude. It's kind of fascinating.
Love it, man. So here's a challenge for everyone that's listening. Um, go go intentionally seek out friendships that are unlikely for you, right? Seek out the old grandpa from a different race, from a different demographic, from a different culture, and seek friendship in that. Have a conversation. Or, you know, if anything, maybe just read a different book with a different perspective, or listen to a different podcast, or, um, you know, try to just understand somebody else's perspective that is different from your own. And I think that it will open up your eyes to just have a different mindset towards things, to have more empathy, to show more love, to be the good neighbor. Um, it's a cool challenge. I'm gonna, definitely start doing more of it myself. Um, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, and obviously be sensitive. Don't be like, hey, I've got this kinetic man challenge.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
you're you're a, you're a black guy. I gotta get, I gotta check
Will
this off my
will you
list.
be
So
my will you be my friend because you're black and
will you
I'm
be my
white?
friend for this month? It's February and it's Black History Month. I really would love just a black friend.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, no, don't do that. But just be genuinely curious. Is I think to your point, genuinely curious in the things that you select to consume. Like, and there are funny places. Like dude, I'll tell you, my eyes have been opened to a lot of issues by watching Dave Chappelle's comedy, right? Because he does not shy away from um he doesn't shy away from certain topics that are pretty profound, and he's a smart dude, man. Like
Yeah,
him, I mean, comedy is a great place. Jon Stewart, right? Like I've learned a lot through their comedy. Again, you don't have to accept 100% of the things that people say that you embrace. And if you do accept 100% of the things that people say, there's probably a good chance that you're super ignorant anyways, right? Like
yeah,
there should not be somebody in your life where you're like, everything that comes out of your mouth, I'm on board with, unless that is Jesus Christ. That's my personal opinion.
okay,
So yeah, it's good, man. There's fun ways to do this as well. Just broaden your perspective, open your mind a little bit. And also what could really be cool is that you can take those things that you believe strongly in and you can give your perspective as well. Like
sure,
imagine a conversation of well, why do you feel that way about homosexuality? And is there any love in that at all? You're like, well, this is the framework of my beliefs, and this is who Jesus is, and this is that conversation. There's a lot of goodness in that too, man. So
good stuff.
giddy up,
Giddy up.
giddy up.
Bye.
So